Merry Christmas, everyone. Today's ornament tag is going to be a design team project for Infinity Engravings. And I call these ornament tags because I like to give them with gifts and they can use them as an ornament on the tree for years to come if they so choose, and I hope they do. I like to see them from several years past up on the tree so I can kind of look and see it's past stuff I've done and so on. So starting out with a Ranger Manilla tag and some distress ink. I'm using Blueprint Sketch, Brush Corduroy, and Evergreen Bough. And I'm pointing out the larger drops of color. And I pick up any excess water so that I get a better concentration of color. The more water you get in distress ink, the thinner it becomes, so the less intense the color. I'm doing two tags here. Now this one will be done with the second tag. So this one you're seeing right now. That is the one we'll use for this project. And the other one I have already posted on my YouTube channel if you're interested in checking that one out too. So you want to heat dry these. Normally I don't heat dry, but these I do heat dry because if you stamp on top of these when they're wet or there's any moisture left in the paper, your image can blur out and distort. So that's why I heat dry these. If they are dry feeling but cool to the touch, they're still wet, so you need to heat dry them a little more. And they do curl up when you first begin to heat dry them, but then they flatten back out. So I added a little more Blueprint Sketch to my craft mat, and I wanted to add some more blue to this and get a little more speckled and specific dots. So I really liked the aged and tattered look to this. It's kind of what Tim Holtz style is known for, is the tattered distressed look, hence the title Distress Ink. And this is not my technique, this is one of his. I've just been doing this for, I don't know, years. And people seem to really like them. They're really interesting. They're really unique. They're incredibly customizable. So you use whatever colors you want. You can make them as simple or elaborate as you want. Kind of do your thing with them. And no two tags look alike. Even if you try to make two of the same, they're not going to be the same. There's going to be differences. So just keep that in mind when you're doing these. That if it doesn't turn out perfectly identical, it won't. And that's the fun in it. You never know what you're going to get. So here's my tag. It's all dried. It's all speckled. And I really like the look of it. I think that looks so cool. So I'm going in with this swirly snowflake stamp. And this is by Inkadinkadoo. It doesn't have a title. It only has a number. And I will have that info in the description box. So I'm using some white pigment ink. This happens to be Simon Says stamp. I do prefer color box over Simon Says stamp, but this one works well too. Just not my favorite. So I ink that up and I stamp it randomly. Try to make it look random around my tag. Another reason why having a dry tag is important, especially with these techniques, is because we're going to use embossing powder. And if there's any stray moisture left in the tag, your embossing powder is going to stick. And then we won't get the intricate design of the stamp with the embossing powder. So just something to keep in mind. If you're using clear embossing powder, it won't matter so much. But if you really want your design of the stamp to stick out and stand out, like I do want my white snowflakes to stand out, then it is important that your tag be completely dry so that your powder only sticks to the stamped image. So I'm using some white Sparkling Snow Wow embossing powder, embossing glitter. Super pretty. I love Wow powders. They're among the best in the industry, in my opinion. So we're going to heat set that. And whenever you're heat embossing, you want to let your gun run for a good 30 seconds before you apply it to your project. And that's going to avoid warping as much as possible. And you avoid running the risk of overheating as well. And when you overheat embossing powder, it kind of sinks into the paper so that you're not getting the raised effect. So as soon as your powder goes from a dry, sandy look to a shinier, glittery look, you know it's heat set and you're good to go. So this stamp is from Tim Holtz, Stampers Anonymous, and it's Holiday Wishes. This is an older set. I'm sure they still make it, but it's probably 5 or 6 years old. And it's well loved, as you can see. So I'm using my Blueprint Sketch Distress ink, and I'm not doing a full inking. I'm just kind of randomly swiping it on there because I want a random look to the stamp. So as you can see, I'm just kind of randomly stamping it here and there. And you can stamp with distress inks. A lot of people think you can't. You can. They don't do so well with clear stamps, but they work pretty well on rubber stamps. So just keep that in mind. So this Snowflake chipboard is from Infinity Engravings, and they make all kinds of really cool die-cut chipboard. This is thicker, so it's kind of a thick, stiff cardboard thickness. And I'm going to cover this with embossing ink. This is Ranger in a dabber top bottle style. Kind of similar to how the distress paints come. Same bottle style. So I'm going to cover that with embossing ink. And then we're going to layer up some embossing powder. And basically you know it's covered with your embossing ink when it all looks wet. And so I take my time to really carefully add my embossing ink to make sure I don't get any gaps in my finished powder. So I'm going to go in with Ranger Liquid Platinum Embossing Powder. This is super pretty. It's not quite silver, but not gold either. It's kind of an in-between. And it's really high metallic shine. Emboss is really easy. Love this stuff. It's so pretty. And if it looks kind of speckled when you first heat it, just keep it on there for a few seconds longer until it kind of smooths out. And here is my second layer. And as you build this up, you're going to notice that the powder looks thicker, and that's what you want. And if it's still hot, you can add powder on top without adding another layer of ink, which is what I did here. But it's only hot in places, as you can see on this one. It still worked out just fine. But if it doesn't, heat what you've got on there so it's melted, and then go in with another layer of ink and powder. I'm going to heat set that, and then you want to immediately press the stamp into the warm powder so that you get the impression of the stamp. It kind of looks like it's engraved. So you get the impression of the music notes in the stamp, and I just think it looks really cool. I call it an engraved embossing powder. That's also another one of Tim's techniques. That's not mine. I can't claim that one. So what I'm doing here is adding some Blueprint Sketch around the edges of my tag to kind of enhance that blue tone. And I'm just doing this around the edges. So not to the interior of the tag, but just the edges. I wanted to keep the distinction of color with the brown and green that's already in the tag. From the initial ink dipping, but then enhance the blue. And adding the blue over top of the white embossing helps the white to stand out more. And then we've got our ink, or our snowflake in the middle on top. Trying to show you some of that detail. I'm going to use some Tombow Mono Multi Liquid Glue on the back of this, just because it's easier than trying to cut foam dots for the tiny little areas in the back. And I weight that down with a couple of acrylic blocks just to make sure I get good adhesion to the surface of the tag. I did let that sit on there longer than what you showed on the video. So this die cut is from My Favorite Things. It came in the October card kit, I believe. I will link it in the description box if I can. I think they're sold out of them though. So I die cut this out of some silver glitter paper from Die Cuts with a View, and then I'm going to attach that using the same glue, so the Tombow Mono Multi Liquid Glue. I did my Christmas first so that I would have better spacing for the Mary. Just kind of pressing that down with my fingers. This glue does dry pretty quickly as long as you're not using too much. And it is really strong too. And then I always lose the dots on my eyes in my die cuts. So I usually just replace it with an enamel dot or an adhesive gem, something like that, that is size appropriate. And so I grabbed a random pack I had. I believe the enamel dot that I use is from Virginia Turtle, but you can use any white or even a gem dot that you've got in your collection. And that is the finished tag. So I like to write on the back the date and the year that I made it for whoever I'm giving it to. So thanks for hanging out with me today. Have a Merry Christmas, and we will see you later. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.